Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are diving into the world of radio monitoring.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, this is going to be pretty cool. We're basing it all off of the book Radio Monitoring, the How-To Guide
Yep.
by T.J. Skip AREY and 2EI.
And 2EI, right.
So this book really aims to guide people like you and me on how to capture various types of radio signals. And it kind of gives us this way to access information that's beyond just our commercial TV and radio, right?
Yeah, totally. Like beyond just turning on the FM dial and getting what's programmed in there.
Absolutely, yeah. So think beyond that. And this book, it covers a range of signals from, local stuff like your local emergency services all the way up to, international politics. And even in some cases, you can get stuff about space programs.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's really cool. So the author, T.J. AREY, or Skip as he's known, he wrote this book, and it was initially published way back in 1997. But we're using a much more recent edition. We're using the third edition from 2010, which is available under a Creative Commons license.
All right, so this is great because that means that basically we can share this information with anybody, and we can talk about it and copy it.
Exactly, yeah. As long as we give attribution to Skip and we don't modify the content in any way and we're using it for non-commercial purposes, we're good to go.
Okay, great.
So in his author's note for this third edition, Skip mentions that the information might not be totally up to date. I mean, it is from 2010, so
Yeah, makes sense.
some things have probably changed. But he does say it still contains a wealth of information for beginners. And even more experienced users might find the dated material kind of amusing.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to see how things have changed and what people were using back then.
Absolutely. And maybe something that worked back then might not work so well now, or vice versa.
Yeah. Or maybe we've discovered new ways of doing things.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
And it's also worth noting that Skip expresses his gratitude in the book's preface to the North American Shortwave Association, which is also known as NASWA for hosting the electronic edition.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so they're kind enough to host that. He also thanks the Culpsville Winter SWL Fest for their continued support.
That's great.
And of course, he thanks those who purchased previous editions.
Nice.
And most importantly, he thanks his family for their support.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always important to have that support system.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's cool that he included those acknowledgments in there. So getting into the book a little bit, we've talked about kind of what it covers, who wrote it, but why don't you tell us a little bit about why this is still relevant? I mean, radio monitoring, it's been around for a long time. What makes it so appealing to you?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it has been around for a long time, but I think that's actually part of the appeal. It's this, this classic hobby that still holds up today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something really fun and fascinating about, using basic equipment and being able to pick up these weak signals from really far away places. It's like this kind of secret world of communication that's just out there waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's like you're tapping into something hidden, like a secret code or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it appeals to that, that sense of exploration and discovery that a lot of people have. You never know what you're going to find out there.
So for someone who's listening who's never even thought about radio monitoring, right? Never considered it.
Yeah.
What kind of things could they potentially hear if they were to actually kind of get into this hobby?
Oh, man. Like a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does depend on where you are, what kind of equipment you have. But Skip, in his book, he gives some really cool examples. Like he talks about, listening to local emergency services like police and fire.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which could be really interesting, especially if you live in like a busy city.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But then he also talks about, listening to like ships at sea.
Oh, wow.
Or like ham radio operators from all over the world.
So you can get international stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with shortwave radio, you can pick up broadcasts from like all over the globe. News, music, all sorts of stuff.
That's awesome. So it's not just like local chatter. You can actually get a global perspective.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
It's like opening a window to the world. And in some cases, you can even pick up signals related to space programs.
Wait, really? You can hear space stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty rare. And it usually sounds like a bunch of bleeps and bloops.
Mm.
But it's still cool to think that you're picking up something from, outer space.
No, that's super cool. So you're telling me that I could potentially sit in my living room and listen to like astronauts talking to mission control?
Well, I'm not going to be that clear. But, you could pick up telemetry data or other signals related to satellites and stuff.
That's still wild. Okay, so I'm starting to get a sense of like the scope of this, right? It's not just like listening to police scanners. This is like a whole universe of sound out there. But for someone who's completely new to this, like what kind of equipment do you need to even get started? Like, do I need to like build a giant antenna in my backyard or something?
No, no, no. You definitely don't need anything crazy like that.
Yeah.
To start out, like a decent shortwave radio is all you really need. A lot of the portable receivers you can get these days can pick up a pretty wide range of frequencies.
Okay.
You might also want to consider getting an antenna.
Okay.
Sometimes the built-in antenna is fine for strong signals,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want to try and pick up stuff that's further away or weaker, an external antenna can make a huge difference. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Even just like a long piece of wire strung up in your attic can work wonders.
Okay, so like I said, I'm a complete newbie here, so it's not as simple as just like turning on the radio and listening to a clear conversation, right? There's got to be like some level of knowledge or skill involved. Like, how do you know what you're listening to?
Yeah, you're totally right. It's not just like tuning into your favorite FM station. There is definitely a learning curve.
Yeah.
But that's also part of the fun. Like, you have to understand how different frequency bands work. Each one has its own characteristics and types of emissions that you'll find there. And then you got to learn how to identify those signals.
Okay, so that sounds kind of intimidating, but I guess that's where the book comes in handy, right?
Exactly. Skip does a great job of explaining all that stuff in a way that's easy to understand. He covers the basics of, different transmission modes like AM, FM, SSB,
Right.
and how radio waves actually propagate, like how they
Right.
travel through the air. He even talks about the ionosphere, which is a layer of the atmosphere that can affect how far radio waves can travel.
Ionosphere. Man, it's taking me back to like high school science class.
Yeah, it's a little bit sciencey.
But I guess understanding how these waves actually travel is key to knowing where and when you might be able to pick up certain signals, right?
Right, exactly. For example, shortwave radio waves, they can travel really long distances because they bounce off the ionosphere,
Yeah.
especially at night. That's why you can sometimes pick up broadcasts from the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But VHF and UHF signals, which are used for a lot of local stuff, they have a much shorter range and they generally travel in a straight line.
Okay, so we've got all these different frequencies, right?
Yeah.
Different ways that they travel. But how do you actually know what you're listening to? Like, how do you know if it's, a local police dispatch or a ham radio operator in Japan or like a global news broadcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's where the real skill of radio monitoring comes in. You have to learn how to identify the different types of signals.
Yeah.
And there are certain codes and formats that are used for different types of communications. So, for example, ham radio operators, they usually follow certain protocols, and they often use call signs to identify themselves. And shortwave broadcasters, they'll usually identify themselves at certain intervals by saying their name and location. So with practice, you start to recognize these patterns, and you can kind of start to decipher the language of radio waves.
Ah, so it's almost like learning a new language, right?
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
the invisible language of the airwaves.
You mentioned shortwave a couple times.
Yeah.
For someone who's never heard of that before, can you maybe just give us a little explainer? Like, what is shortwave radio?
Yeah, so shortwave radio, it's a portion of the radio spectrum.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because it can travel incredibly long distances, like we were talking about before,
Right.
because of the way that it interacts with the ionosphere. And this makes it really popular for things like international broadcasting. So that's where you'll find those stations that are broadcasting news and cultural programs all over the world.
Got it.
It's also used a lot by governments, the military. And of course, ham radio operators love using shortwave because it allows them to communicate with other hobbyists all over the globe. So in a nutshell, shortwave is really where you can listen to the world from your own home.
Okay, so I think we've done a really good job of kind of laying out like what is radio monitoring, what does it involve,
Yeah.
the kind of equipment, but beyond just the pure fun of, listening to these different signals, is there any real practical benefit or applications to actually doing this?
Yeah, there are actually quite a few benefits. I mean, on a basic level, it's a really amazing way to learn about the world.
Okay.
You're exposed to different perspectives. You might hear information that you wouldn't necessarily get from your usual mainstream media sources.
Right.
It can also be a great tool for language learning if you listen to broadcasts in different languages.
Right.
And it can also help you stay informed about international events by listening to, news broadcasts directly from the source.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, for some people, it's just about satisfying that innate curiosity that we all have about, how technology works and how we communicate with each other.
Yeah, and I would imagine for people who maybe have a specific interest in communications or electronics or even like security, this could be like a really hands-on way to learn more about those fields.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I mean, understanding how signals are transmitted, what potential vulnerabilities there might be in those systems, and like the different communication protocols that are used, that can
Mm.
be super valuable knowledge in a variety of fields.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and then beyond that, for a lot of people, it's just a really relaxing and rewarding hobby. It's a way to kind of disconnect from the constant noise of everyday life and connect with something that's, beyond what we can see.
Yeah, I like that. It's like a mindfulness practice almost, just tuning in and listening to the world.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool.
It's pretty amazing to think that all this information is just like floating around us all the time, right?
Yeah.
Invisible but accessible if you have the right equipment and the know-how. And that's what I think is so great about Skip's book. It really gives you the tools and knowledge you need to start exploring this fascinating world of radio.
Yeah, totally. And even though it was published back in 2010, the fundamentals that he lays out are still totally relevant today.
Absolutely. And the fact that it's available under a Creative Commons license means that it's really easy for anyone to access and start learning.
Yeah, that's
It's like
fantastic.
an open invitation to go on a sonic adventure.
I love that. Well, I think this has been a great deep dive into the world of radio monitoring.
Yeah, for sure.
We've learned so much about, what it is, how it works, the kind of equipment you need, and the amazing variety of signals that are out there just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, and I hope that this conversation has sparked some curiosity in our listeners about the hidden world of radio signals that surround us all the time. It's a really cool way to connect with events and information that you might not otherwise be aware of.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in learning more, we highly encourage you to check out the Creative Commons license for radio monitoring, the how-to guide. Maybe look into some online communities or radio monitoring associations in your area, like the North American Shortwave Association that Skip mentioned in his book. And if you have any questions about reusing the material from the book, his contact information is in there as well.
Yeah, and to wrap things up, we'd like to leave you with a thought-provoking question. What unexpected signals might be traveling through the airwaves right now, all around you, carrying stories and information that you never even knew existed?
It's a great question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.